I got tired of Autumn after 3 years together. She was in a car accident that caused irreversible damage to her corneas. The doctor said she would most likely go blind. After careful consideration, I decided it was best to break up with her now, to compensate her for the youth she spent with me and to ensure she would never bother me again. I took out all my savings, $100,000, and told her you're about to go blind, so please stop clinging to me like a dog from now on. 7 years later, she became a celebrated, critically acclaimed A-list actress. The host asked her, have you ever experienced a love that left an indelible mark on your heart? She shook her head firmly. No, only a hatred so deep it's etched into my bones, a hatred that makes me want to kill him with my own hands. 0. One heavy snow fell in thick flurries. I stubbed out my cigarette, tossed the empty pack into the trash along with it, but brushed the snow off my coat and strode into the hospital. I was here to break up with my girlfriend Autumn, and I brought all my savings with me. $100,000 compensation for the 3 years of her youth she spent with me. That should be enough. After all, I've been the one taking care of her all these years. She never contributed much. I hope we can part on good terms. The 12th floor of the inpatient ward Autumn's room happens to be right across from the nurse's station. A young intern nurse teased me when she saw me here. To see your girlfriend again, why no flowers today? I forced a half smile, but couldn't quite manage it, so I just nodded politely instead. I stood by the hospital room door for a while, shaking off the chill from my body. A few minutes later, I pushed open the door and walked in quietly. Autumn was standing by the window looking outside. When she heard the noise, she turned around and exclaimed cheerfully, Ethan, you're here. Her face bore several severe abrasions, the wounds just beginning to scab over in pinkish-brown patches. A large patch of her hair had been shaved off, wrapped in thick bandages. Her exposed forearms bore extensive bruises. More injuries were concealed beneath her oversized hospital gown. These were all wounds sustained in the car accident a week prior when the hit-and-run vehicle dragged her for over 10 meters, tearing off a significant portion of her scalp. Her left scapula was fractured with multiple impact injuries and severe abrasions on her body. But the most severe damage was to her eyes. The violent collision had caused irreversible damage to her corneas. The doctor said she would most likely lose her sight. He told me they would try conservative treatment first, but if there was no improvement, a corneal transplant would be the only way to restore her vision. Looking at the girl who used to smile so sweetly, her once bright eyes now clouded and unfocused as she gazed in my direction. Probably now in her eyes, I'm just a blurry shadow. I suddenly found myself speechless. How could I possibly break up with her right after her car accident, when she's facing the threat of blindness? But avoiding it wouldn't help. I had to face this day, eventually. Autumn, seeing that I hadn't responded for a long time, began moving towards me step by step. Because her vision was blurry, she tried to hold on to things as she walked. I had to quicken my pace. To catch her the moment I grasped her arm, I could clearly feel her whole body relax. She was about to open her arms to hug me when she suddenly wrinkled her nose and sniffed at me, asking, Ethan, why do you smell like smoke? Have you been smoking? I wanted to tell her, yes, I smoke, but what came out was, how could that be? I was standing in the hallway downstairs for a while. Maybe I picked up someone else's smoke. We're about to break up anyway. No need to argue with her over this. Looking at her in the thin hospital gown, I asked angrily, why aren't you staying in bed properly? The moment I can't see you, you wander off. Always causing trouble for others. Well, thankfully these days are almost over. She pouted coquettishly. Sitting in bed all day makes my butt go numb. The nurse said it's snowing outside, and these past 2 days my vision has been getting worse. I want to see more of the world while I still can. Who knows, in a few days, I might not even see those blurry shadows anymore. My heart felt as if it were being churned by a blade's edge, making it hard to breathe. I cursed irritably, idiot. She hugged me tightly, just like countless times before, rubbing her hair against my face. But what filled my nostrils was no longer her faint, fresh scent. Instead, it was the thick smell of ointment. That medicinal odor churned my stomach, making me retch with nausea. I pushed her away abruptly. Autumn froze, watching me retch with a look of utter bewilderment. Panic surfaced in her beautiful, vacant eyes as she asked, Ethan, what's wrong with you? It took a long while for the nausea to gradually subside. I tilted my head back, took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly to calm myself. I reminded myself not to forget today, as purpose, clenching my fists until nails bit into palms. I desperately suppressed the howling emotions within, forcing my voice to sound steady and cold. Autumn, the doctor said you might go blind, you know that, right? Her eyes darkened as she nodded sadly. The hit-and-run driver still hasn't been caught, so there's no one to compensate your medical expenses, is there? Her lips trembled slightly, her expression growing even more desolate as she lowered her head and began nervously picking at her fingers. This was her tell. When she felt extremely anxious, I took the bank card from my pocket and pressed it into her hand. Here's all my savings, $100,000 for your medical treatment. The password is your birthday. No, I want tea. Take it. Autumn shook her head, frantically hiding her hand behind her back, refusing to accept my card. Listen to me. First, I raised my voice, then grabbed her hand and placed the card in her palm. Trying to make my tone firm and cold, I said, take this $100,000 for now. we're cutting all ties and going our separate ways. She stopped struggling, standing completely still. Snowflakes danced outside the frosted window, casting a gloomy, hazy light that made her frail figure appear broken and desolate. With her back to the light, her face was as pale as frost, her expression tinged with bewilderment. After a long pause, she gave a faint, forced smile as tears welled up in her eyes. "Ethan, I don't understand what you mean." I cut her off coldly. "Don't play dumb. We're breaking up from now on. We're nothing to each other." But why her emotions were crumbling, yet she bit her lip desperately to hold back. Torrential tears streamed down her freshly scabbed cheeks. I couldn't bear to see her like this, so I turned my back. My stomach convulsed with violent pain from the overwhelming emotions, forcing me to double over while pressing my hand hard against it. Hoarsely, I enunciated each word, because I don't want a disabled girlfriend. Autumn seemed not to hear my words. She groped her way forward, stood before me, and held my arm with a worried expression, saying, "Ethan, what's wrong? Is your stomach hurting again?" She tried to see me clearly, leaning her head closer by another 2 inches, looking at her small face filled with concern and anxiety. I felt a flicker of hesitation and softening in my heart. Was I wrong? But soon I banished such thoughts. I had to cut the knot quickly. The sooner we broke up, the better. 03. I roughly shook off her hand, my face full of disgust. "Haven T, I made myself clear enough. What part don't you understand? The doctor said you'll go blind. Do you really think I'd marry a blind woman?" My probably ferocious expression must have frightened her. She froze for a few seconds before bursting into tears of grievance. "Ethan, what's wrong with you? Don't you want me anymore?" I furrowed my brows and nodded firmly. Right? That 100,000 is compensation for your wasted youth. You can use it to treat your blind eyes. Maybe there's still some hope. Shaking her head through tears, she threw herself into my arms and wrapped her hands around my waist. "I don't want to break up, and I don't want any compensation money. I can't believe you'd be so cruel back when we were struggling so hard. You never abandoned me." I could feel her body trembling, and my heart ached too. After all, we'd been together for many years. I watched her grow from an immature girl into the graceful, elegant woman she was today. The situation had become so ugly now, and this wasn't what I wanted to see happen. I gripped her thin arm, clenched my teeth, and pulled her away from my embrace before shoving her aside. I had intended to make her stand farther from me, but she stumbled and lost her balance, falling to the ground. "Fine, let me be ruthless then." I stared at her on the ground and said, "Get lost. Stop clinging to me like a dog. 7 years ago, you follow me around like a stray. Every day, I raised you, paid for your education. What now? Are you going to cling to me and drag me down for the rest of my life just because you are going blind? But I'm done being a damn fool. Now, get the hell out, you hear me?" This isn't a discussion. It's a notice. Autumn collapsed onto the floor, her hollow eyes wide open, her entire body trembling. Soon after, heart-wrenching sobs erupted, cries that resembled the fragmented whimpers of a wounded young animal. Yet each of her anguished wails pierced me like blades, leaving my entire body numb with pain. I felt ashamed and could no longer bear to listen, staggering out of the ward. The moment I closed the ward door behind me, a cry of utter despair followed. "Ethan, please don't go." 04. I still left. After all, if I stayed to comfort her, this breakup might fail. She would seize the chance to cling to me. Since we're breaking up, it must be done completely. Many of her belongings are still in my place, and I plan to store them in the temporary apartment I rented for her. After making multiple trips to move all her things, it was already the afternoon of the next day. I was practically dead tired. As for Autumn, I didn't plan to see her again. After all, I was in the wrong, and I was afraid her crying and tantrums would only upset me. So I called Autumn's friend Maya, intending to have her temporarily hold onto the rental contract and keys until Autumn was discharged from the hospital. I arranged to meet Maya at the cafe. Before heading out, I freshened up, looking bright and energetic. But after waiting for a long time, Maya still hadn't shown up. I stared blankly at the glass of plain water I asked the waiter for. "Miss ID, like this mousse cake?" A clear voice drew my attention to the counter. Seeing that petite figure with the high ponytail, I was momentarily dazed. She reminds me so much of Autumn when she was little. My thoughts involuntarily drifted back to the past. Autumn was someone I picked up that year. I was 16. She was 13. I was an orphan, and coincidentally, so was she, but her circumstances were different from mine. One could even say far more tragic. My parents died from carbon monoxide poisoning when our old-fashioned gas heater leaked during winter. I narrowly escaped disaster by staying in the school dormitory, but my parents passed away, leaving me a small house. Their company took pity on my young age and gave me an employee compensation payment. Social services covered my public school education expenses. Though my life was hard, it was manageable. Autumn's parents were prominent figures in our town, and her family owned a large factory. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on their side when the business failed overnight, leaving them saddled with massive debts. Debt collectors surrounded her home and factory daily, splashing paint and making threats. In the end, the couple couldn't bear the pressure any longer and climbed to the rooftop before jumping to their deaths. Their villa luxury cars, everything was auctioned off while the factory equipment was completely emptied by the loan company. Only she had nowhere to go the day I found her was just like today, with heavy snow falling. She was wearing thin autumn clothes and slippers that exposed her feet shivering as she stood in front of a closed convenience store, probably because there was a cluster of bright lights there. It was after evening self-study in my first year of high school. On my way home, I happened to see her hugging her arms and crying helplessly, her face and hair covered in snow. And so I took her home and made her a bowl of ramen. From then on, I gained a little sister, not that I was willing at that time. I could barely support myself. How could I have the energy to take care of a bratty kid? But no matter how many times I sent her back to her Aunt S's place, within half an hour, she'd come running back. She'd just stare at me pitifully, her eyes brimming with tears. How could I refuse her? From then on, my life had an extra burden I couldn't shake off. 05, to be honest, thinking back on those years, having Autumn in my life was truly blissful. After my parents passed away, I spent those years like a child forgotten in some corner. My grandparents had died early, and my maternal relatives showed no intention of maintaining any connection with me. I visited my maternal grandparents' home a few times. My aunt would slam things around in front of me, while my grandmother just sighed helplessly by the side. Back then, though I was only 12, I had already learned a thing or two about the ways of the world. After that, I never went back until Autumn came and I had family again. I was in 10th grade, Autumn in 7th. Every morning, I'd make her breakfast, wake her up, then bike her to school. On evenings, when she didn't have night classes, she'd buy groceries and cook dinner, always leaving a portion for me to eat after my own night classes. To save money, we often went to the supermarket to buy discounted food nearing its expiration date. Mr. Henderson at the butcher shop would also sell us leftover meat at a lower price. 3 years passed like this. The year she got into my high school, I left for university. To tutor her, I enrolled at a decent local university so I could come home every week. Of course, there was another more secretive reason that I found hard to voice. I had fallen for Autumn, fallen for this girl who followed me around every day. I felt ashamed of my despicable thoughts, but how could I control matters of the heart? Yet I didn't want to ruin our relationship. To love a flower is to quietly await its bloom. This flower didn't necessarily have to belong to me. Being a bystander admiring the blooming flowers is also a form of happiness. That was what I thought at the time, but Autumn had started treating me differently without me noticing when it began. It started with how she addressed me. She stopped calling me Ethan and instead began using Ethan Shun every time. When I scolded her for being impolite, she would pout her little mouth and glare at me angrily. Later on, she started affectionately calling me Ethan again. I corrected her a few times, but she never changed, so I let it be. As long as she was happy, she could call me whatever she wanted. That winter break, during the first snow of the season, we walked side by side after buying holiday supplies from the supermarket. The warm yellow streetlights spilled over her fair face, intertwining with the dancing snowflakes. She was like a celestial being fallen to earth. Perhaps the scene was too ethereal, making me feel unreal, and I couldn't help but utter a sentence. Her footsteps halted as she turned to me with a shocked expression, demanding, "What did you just say?" Her flushed face instantly brought me back to my senses, and I quickened my pace, fleeing in panic. "Ethan Shin, you stop right there. What did you just say? I want you to say it again." Autumn was chasing after me at a jogging pace. What had I said? What I said was, "Autumn, I love you 06. At this point in my recollection, my mind feels muddled. Although I broke up with Autumn, the emotions of all these years couldn't be severed so easily. An endless melancholy suddenly rises in my heart. It feels like something most essential is missing from my life. Fortunately, Maya arrived, interrupting those vexing memories. I just stood up to greet her when she slapped me hard across the face. The slap left my head spinning and my ears ringing. "Ethan Shin, you're a complete bastard. How could you break up with Autumn when she needed you the most? You're not even human." Tears welled in her eyes. As she gritted her teeth, I took a deep breath to steady myself. Noticing the surrounding gazes turning our way, I gestured toward the opposite seat to avoid making a scene. Maya sat down resentfully, arms crossed, her eyes glaring daggers at me. I handed her the rental contract and apartment keys, the place I'd rented for Autumn. She glanced over and scoffed lightly. "What now? You're going to kick her out? Is that it? Not even leaving her a place to stay? I should have seen your true nature long ago. And to think I once believed you were good to Autumn. What a despicable man." Feeling guilty, I lacked the courage to argue and simply continued on my own. "Maya, I've rented a 3-year apartment. For Autumn, I've moved all her belongings there." She stared at me, scanning me up and down. Without responding, I went on, "I'm leaving soon, going to start a business in another city with friends. She's in the hospital now and might need a corneal transplant later. Could you spare more time to take care of her?" Maya stared at me so intensely that I felt prickles of discomfort down my spine, too afraid to even lift my head and meet her gaze. She said, "Autumn and I are close friends. No need for your concern. Unlike a cowardly dog like you who runs at the first sign of trouble, I actually care about her. You make me sick." I still wanted to remind her about Autumn's post-surgery care. Maya picked up the rental contract, stood up, and poured the glass of water in front of me over my head. She slammed the empty glass down on the table and shouted at me. Ethan Shin, stop with your self-indulgent performance here. I'm not Autumn. If you want to leave, then get the hell away and never show your face in front of her again. Otherwise, I'll slap you. Every time I see you, the only reason I came here was to teach you a lesson for Autumn's sake. Just looking at you makes me sick. If you're going to be a coward now, then stay in your shell forever. I'll take care of her. You don't need to worry about it. With that, she stormed out. In anger, I stared at her retreating figure for a long time, unable to snap out of it. People around me were looking at me with scrutinizing eyes, as if they could see the filth in my soul. 07, whatever, I'm leaving this place, soon anyway, so it doesn't matter what they think of me. For now, and I'll have a fresh start. I stepped out of the cafe, shivering as the cold air hit me. Snowflakes had begun to fall again outside. This year's snowfall has been heavy, one storm after another, as if trying to blanket the entire world in pure white. Before leaving the city, I spent several days revisiting every place Autumn and I had ever walked together. Considered a memorial for our dead love, I've always been one for ceremony. Yet the thought of that girl still brings an ache to my heart. But it's all right, time will fade all things, and we'll grow accustomed to lives missing that special someone. Finally, the day arrived for me to embark on my new journey. I felt both excited and reluctant. In the end, I simply waved goodbye to the girl from that past time with a sense of release. Autumn, goodbye. I'm leaving now, but you must live well on your own. 7 years later, a brilliantly lit television studio on a popular talk show, Autumn, and the main cast were promoting their upcoming fantasy drama. During the rapid-fire Q&A session, the host asked Autumn, Autumn, have you ever experienced a love as unforgettable as the one in this drama in real life? Autumn froze for a moment, then shook her head firmly with a smile. Love? Certainly not, but I do have a hatred so deep it's etched in my bones, a hatred that makes me want to kill him with my own hands. The season host quickly seized the key point in her words. He clearly wasn't willing to give up the opportunity to dig deep into the love life of a popular actress to add explosive content to the show. He pressed further. Deep in your bones. Does that mean the other person was a scumbag who hurt you so deeply that you still can't forget it? From another perspective, could this hatred stem from having loved too deeply? Autumn suddenly fell into prolonged silence. The atmosphere became somewhat awkward. A young crew member nearby quickly stepped in to smooth things over. Autumn here hasn't experienced soul-crushing love, but I have come let me tell you all about it. He then proceeded to recount his dozen-plus romantic escapades from middle school through college. It took several pointed glances from the host before he finally closed his mouth. Ever since the host asked those two questions, Autumn had been visibly distracted. Because she was so absent-minded, their team kept losing points during the game segment. Everyone could tell something was off with her. As the show neared its end, the host followed the usual routine by wishing the new drama great success and asking for audience and netizen support. At that moment, Autumn suddenly raised her microphone and looked at the host. With a serious expression, he uttered a single word, enough. 08. That night, trending hashtags exploded across major social media platforms. Autumn betrayed by scumbag turns hate from love. Autumn reveals she once had a passionate love. Autumn says enough, and heavy dew falls on the nighttime air accompanied by the chirping of insects. Autumn, wrapped in a shawl, curled up on the sofa of her villa's open-air balcony, sipping red wine. She was frighteningly thin, looking as if she might be swallowed by the night at any moment. Setting down her wine glass, she stared blankly at her phone screen, the message interface lingering for a long time. It was an unsent message. Ethan Shun, if you kneel down right now, count out to apologize, and slap yourself a few times, I might consider forgiving you. The number was one she had long memorized by heart, yet in 7 years, she had never once contacted that scumbag. After drinking half a bottle of red wine, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. As if making a major decision, her fingertips trembled slightly as she pressed the green send button. After sending the message, she nervously began picking at her fingers again. It was a childhood habit of hers back then. Whenever Ethan saw her like this, he would tightly hold her hand. The warmth of his palm always inexplicably calmed her. She picked up her phone, then put it down again, and again. Hours passed, and her mood grew increasingly agitated. He didn't reply. He actually didn't reply. Furious, she grabbed her phone and dialed the number. After more than 10 seconds, a drowsy female voice answered on the other end. Hello, who is this? Autumn froze. Was that his wife or his girlfriend? How what a heartless man indeed. Even now, she couldn't let go, yet he had long since moved on to another woman. Autumn grew somewhat angry, her voice unconsciously tinged with irritation. I'm looking for Ethan Shun. The other party paused for a few seconds. Miss, I think you've got the wrong number. I don't know any Ethan Shun. With that, the other party hung up. Autumn stared at the disconnected screen, feeling utterly crushed. Who gave him the right to break up just because he said so? Who gave him the right to leave so effortlessly and carefree? She dialed the number again. The person on the other end sounded impatient. Will you stop? Already don't you see what time it is? I already told you. I don't know any Ethan Shun. Autumn was momentarily at a loss for words, unsure how to respond. The other person sighed and softened their tone a bit. Maybe the person you're talking about used this number before. A few years ago someone else called this number looking for him too. For some reason, Autumn secretly felt relieved upon hearing this. That meant this woman had nothing to do with him. She apologized. I'm sorry to disturb your rest. May I ask one last question? How long have you had this number? After a brief pause, the voice replied, over 6 years, before hanging up. Over 6 years? He must have canceled the number right after their breakup. Autumn smiled bitterly. Indeed, a man who no longer loves is the cruelest. For 7 years, she hadn't dared to change her phone number, afraid he wouldn't find her if he ever came back. She poured out the remaining red wine from the bottle in one go and down it all. Drunk, she curled up in a corner of the sofa, murmuring to herself, Ethan Shun, how could you be so heartless all these years, and you never showed up? I'm a star now. I have so much money, you see that, don't you? I'm no longer the Autumn who could only hold you back, so why won't you appear? Even as just friends, even if I had to see you standing with another woman, just let me see you once. Is that really so hard? She burst into tears, yet the only response was the mournful wind wailing across the balcony. 09. Since Autumn became a celebrity, relatives who once avoided her like the plague have all gathered around again. They spoke of their past helplessness, claiming the family's limited income simply couldn't support another growing child, especially since she carried debts herself, with loan sharks coming to demand payment every few days. They talked about daughters repaying father's debts. She nodded without exposing their lies, simply having her assistant give them a few $100s to send them away. Consider it charity. Though these people were her relatives, they could sometimes become the sharp blades of public opinion. As a celebrity, she didn't want these people spreading baseless negative rumors about her. Moreover, as they said, every family had its own difficulties. She couldn't morally pressure others to take her in. Except for her aunt, hearing that other relatives could profit from her aunt repeatedly tried to cozy up. She would have her assistant turn them away, directly avoiding any meeting. She would always remember herself at 13, just after losing her parents. The aunt, her mother's only sister, looked at her with disdainful eyes. When the Autumn family was wealthy, they never hesitated to help her out. Even her car and house were furnished by her parents. After the incident, Autumn's aunt's family avoided her as if she were a plague. With no other immediate relatives, the local child protection agency persuaded her reluctant aunt to take her in. She was 13, that year already beginning to mature, and noticed her undergarments would often disappear without reason. Until one day she accidentally caught her uncle fondling her underwear. She burned with shame and anger, yet had no one to confide in, forcing her to endure it in silence. Later, her uncle grew bolder, often taking liberties with her when her aunt wasn't home. Tearfully, she told her aunt, but instead of scolding her husband, her aunt called her a shameless little temptress who seduced men at such a young age. She screamed in protest, but her aunt only responded by slapping her twice across the face before throwing her out. The snow was falling heavily that day, yet she wore only thin autumn clothes and the cartoon slippers her parents had bought her before they passed away. She wandered aimlessly down the road, snow covering her entire body. A few ill-intentioned hoodlums whistled at her, and in panic, she fled to the entrance of a small supermarket. There were surveillance cameras there, and the shop owner was present. The troublemakers scattered. She stood there until the snow grew thicker, until the streetlights flickered on in the evening, until the supermarket owner rolled down the shutter. She was cold and hungry, nearly frozen to the point of passing out. Just then that boy appeared, Ethan Shun. He stopped his bicycle, one long leg planted on the ground, and asked with concern, "Little one, why are you standing here alone? Where are your parents?" Autumn looked up at the boy before her. His blue and white school uniform was already dusted white with snow, his fluffy hair covered in snowflakes. The icy wind swirled the snow around, landing on the tip of his nose, only to melt instantly from the warmth of his breath. His features were so handsome, his eyes shining like stars with long, thick lashes dusted with snowflakes, that made him look rather adorable. She didn't respond to his words, only whimpering pitifully, "I'm hungry." So the boy carried her home on his bicycle. He cooked her a bowl of ramen. It was the most delicious ramen she had ever eaten in her life. 10 the next day, Autumn woke up from her drunken stupor, once again the poised and charming image of a strong woman. Only the pain in her heart still lingered faintly, ever since the scar she had concealed was inadvertently exposed by the host the day before. She had been tormented by a question, the agony unbearable. "Where is he? Where the hell is he?" she asked her friend Maya, who scolded her for being lovesick. Why pine after such a heartless bastard? She went to visit her old neighbors, who all smiled and praised her for her success, now insisting she stay for meals and taking photos with her. She even went to see Mr. Henderson from the old butcher shop, who chuckled and reminisced that Ethan was a young man of deep loyalty and sentiment. But no one would tell her where he was. She suddenly grew restless, gripped by an indescribable panic. She turned down all her work commitments and set out with her assistant to find Ethan Shun. However, just like the previous days, no one knew where he was and no one had seen him again. As if he were dead. The thought startled Autumn. Her heart clenched so tightly she could barely breathe. No, impossible. If he had fallen ill or died in an accident, how could no one around him have known? Autumn comforted herself over and over again. She began sorting through old belongings. Once more items Ethan had helped move to her rental apartment years ago, things she kept all this time. When Maya took her to that rented apartment, she kept cursing Ethan the whole time. Call him a scumbag, a dog of a man. Curse him to die a miserable death. At that time, her vision had partially recovered after the eye surgery. As she looked around the warmly decorated rental apartment, she couldn't hold back her tears. The south-facing room was bathed in warm sunlight with a one-bedroom apartment spotlessly clean. Every detail was arranged in her favorite colors. Even the bedding set on the bed featured her most beloved cartoon characters. As she flipped through, she came across the rental contract. On the last page was Ethan Shun's signature. She gazed at those three elegantly flowing characters, tears dripping onto them. She quickly wiped them away with her sleeve, then gently traced the characters with her fingers. On the other side was the landlord's signature and phone number. She dialed the number. 11. She and that landlord, no more accurately the property agent. They met at a cafe bookstore. The agent was a middle-aged woman who was so thrilled about Autumn meeting her that she spent over 10 minutes taking photos before finally sitting down. Autumn smiled and cooperated the whole time. Once seated, she handed the rental contract to the agent and asked if she remembered a client named Ethan Shun. The agent nodded. Ethan, I practically watched that boy grow up. Haven T, seen him in years. Autumn's expression darkened as she pressed further. Was he in good health when he rented the place? Did you hear anything about him being sick? The agent thought for a moment before shaking her head. Not that I know of, but back then, right after your accident, he put that family house up for sale through me. Autumn's head snapped up to look at her. The agent continued. You know, that old neighborhood had top-rated elementary school teachers. Could VE fetch tens of thousands more, but he insisted on selling fast for cash. Just 100,000 yuan. I told him to wait, but he wouldn't listen. Autumn suddenly remembered the card Ethan had given her, exactly 100,000. Was that his house sale money? He gave all the proceeds from selling his home to me. Now, he had neither a house nor any savings left. How would he survive? How would he survive? Autumn murmured to herself. The real estate agent seemed not to hear her, continuing unprompted. After selling his house, he said he wanted to rent an apartment through me, the very one you are holding now. Back then, I followed him to view property after property. He either complained about poor lighting or disliked the neighborhood. I nearly wore my legs out running around with him. If I hadn't watched him grow up, I'd have refused this deal ages ago. The elder sister finished speaking and took a sip of coffee with a smile. Finally found this apartment, and that kid was quite satisfied. He wanted to rent it for 3 years in one go, and even paid the full 3 years rent up front. I secretly told him he could pay every 6 months, but he acted like he didn't hear me. Just a silly kid. The elder sister was reminiscing about the situation. Autumn's hands couldn't stop trembling as she shakily pulled out a few bills from her bag and placed them on the table. Then she suddenly stood up and hurriedly rushed out, leaving only the stunned real estate agent behind. 12. Autumn posted the same message across all her social media accounts. Looking for Ethan Shun, male, currently 30 years old, graduated from Spring Mountain High School. Please contact me if you have any leads, generous reward. Because of this post, Autumn had a huge argument with her agency. The agency said she was acting recklessly, and if competitors seized this opportunity to manipulate the situation, her current career could be ruined overnight. Violating contract terms would also result in massive compensation payments. But Autumn didn't care. Seeing her resolute expression, even her agent couldn't help but soften. She admitted her for so many years the girl was obedient and sensible, approaching every task with diligence. Throughout her years in the industry, there hadn't been a single scandal or negative rumor about her. Compared to the other artists she managed, Autumn had saved her countless headaches. Fortunately, she was only asking about someone's whereabouts, not revealing their relationship. Thanks to Autumn's fame and the buzz around the fantasy drama, this matter drew increasing public attention. Ethan Shun's photo was also circulated online. Before long, Autumn began receiving fragmented pieces of information. Someone claiming to be his university classmate said he seemed to have stomach cancer. They'd seen him taking medication during his thesis defense return to campus. Though he claimed they were ordinary stomach pills, the classmate added their father had taken the same medication for stomach cancer 2 years prior. Another person, identifying as his friend, mentioned he discussed body donation with them, having spent that period extensively researching the topic online. There was also a nurse who said she cared for him during her internship after his car accident. She told Autumn he often step outside his hospital room only to collapse in pain, crouching on the floor. All signs pointed to him possibly having a serious illness. She suddenly remembered that year he, who was originally strong and healthy, suddenly lost weight. He often had stomach pains and secretly took medication. Autumn was very worried, but he just smiled and comforted her saying it was due to the immense pressure of finding a job. The clues had been there all along. Half a month later, Autumn finally learned the whole truth. It turns out that the man named Ethan Shun had already died. He died 7 years ago. A medical student saw photos online and said they bore an uncanny resemblance to one of their former body donors. At the time, they had lamented over this handsome, young body donor. When Autumn approached the medical school's administrative staff, she told them she was Ethan Shun's sister. The staff member bowed deeply to her, then led her to Spring Mountain Cemetery. He told Autumn that after providing 3 years of instruction to students, Mr. Ethan's remains had been cremated and buried here. Ethan Shun wasn't alone. Surrounding him were tombstones of other body donors who had willingly offered their remains for medical education. His tombstone bore no photograph, only the epitaph "Spirit returns to nature legacy remains in the world" with the medical school's inscription. The cemetery was neatly maintained, and Autumn sat down by the edge. Seeing this, the staff quietly took their leave. Autumn stared blankly at the tombstone, yet no tears fell. Perhaps her tears had long dried up over these 7 years. Gently stroking the tombstone, she murmured, "Ethan, you did all this just because you were afraid. I still remember you didn't but don't worry. I've long moved on. I'm a big star. Now, surrounded by countless handsome men, I want to be thinking of you. I'll live well and love myself. After all, that was your wish. I've recently fallen deeply in love with a song called Give You a Little Red Flower. Let me play it for you too." She took out her phone and played for him that very song, which had given her countless encouragement during her loneliest, most desperate times. 13. Autumn, the goddess of the entertainment industry, has maintained a spotless reputation for over 30 years since her debut, with no romantic scandals or marriages. Yet that clip of her saying "settle" while promoting her fantasy drama years ago keeps resurfacing in gossip media, fueling speculation that there's someone she's never been able to let go of in her heart. That winter, Autumn fell seriously ill suddenly. She couldn't hold on any longer. She murmured to herself, "Ethan, I really truly can't go on anymore. I'm so tired, I want to give up. Please don't blame me." She had already arranged her own funeral affairs in advance. She instructed her assistant to bury her at Spring Hill Cemetery after her death. Though they couldn't share a grave, at least she could rest closer to him. 2 days later, she slipped into a coma. In her delirium, she suddenly smiled with girlish sweetness, whispering Ethan. Perhaps the two met in their dreams, the crystal clear snowflakes scattered like fallen pear petals drifting down in sparse clusters. Another year's first snow, 14 extra, Ethan Shun. I'm a scoundrel. My girlfriend was hospitalized after a car accident, facing potential blindness, yet I chose this moment to break up with her. But I had no other choice, even though it felt like my heart and lungs were being torn apart, even though my entire world seemed to be collapsing around me. What else can I do if I don't leave now? I'll have to leave eventually after some time. The pain it would bring her then would be even greater, and it might also waste her precious youth. What's the point? My stomach cancer is already at stage 4, even though I begged the doctor on my knees to save me. Yet he could only sigh and shake his head helplessly. Truth be told, if Autumn weren't in this world, there wouldn't be anything left for me to linger for. With her by my side, even the ants on the ground seemed a bit more adorable. I didn't want to die. When I first learned about my condition, I sought proper treatment. But after 6 months of struggle, death still served me my final notice. Last week, Autumn was in a car accident, and that damned hit-and-run driver fled the scene. My savings have been nearly depleted over the past 6 months due to medical expenses, so I urgently listed my parents' old apartment with a real estate agency for a quick sale. Though if it's an old house, the location is decent. The property was valued at over $100,000, but I only asked for $80,000 on the condition of a full cash payment. Autumn's eyes would definitely require a corneal transplant. But for an ordinary patient like her, with no background or connections, the wait could stretch 2 or 3 years, or even longer. I took my medical report to the doctor and signed a voluntary cornea donation form for her. Anyway, my life was coming to an end. What difference did a few days make? For her sake, I would gladly give even my life. Just thinking that my corneas could bring her light filled my heart with joy. I've also donated my body, so I won't have to worry about no one collecting my remains after death. It's quite a good arrangement. The only thing I can't let go of is her, my Autumn. How could I bear to leave her in this world? We are each other's dearest loved ones. 15. I checked into the hospital mainly because I was afraid if I accidentally died outside and wasn't found for too long, the corneas might become unusable. Before being admitted to the hospital, I went to see Autumn's attending physician again. He told me that Autumn had initially refused the corneal transplant, worried about the high cost, and had been eager to be discharged, but last night she agreed to it. I asked him to keep it a secret that I was the one donating the cornea. He nodded, looking at me with a solemn gaze. The donor confidentiality agreement is something we must adhere to. That puts my mind at ease. I went to the 12th floor ward wearing a mask and hat like some shameful thief. Truth be told, it was even necessary in her current vision condition. She probably wouldn't have been able to recognize me, even if I stood right outside her ward door. I stood outside the ward watching her through the glass window on the door. She remained just like that day, standing alone by the window, gazing outward. The solitary figure looked desolate. I touched the door, making a faint sound. She turned her head abruptly and cried out joyfully, "Ethan, is that you?" Tears gushed out as I hastily hid to one side. The only response she received was the faint rustling of noise from the hospital corridor. After a long while, realizing no one was there, she slowly crouched down, hugged her knees, and burst into tears. I'm sorry, I've said it to her countless times in my heart. Only now do I realize that hurting her is harder than loving her. Autumn, I hope you can forget me quickly after crying. After all the scum who heartlessly abandoned you when you needed care, most isn't worth wasting time remembering. Go ahead and start your new life to the fullest, while I fade into the dust of your memories. 16. The pain grew worse, so intense that my mind began to blur. The doctor prescribed me painkillers, but I didn't take them instead. I gave them to a fellow patient suffering from the same condition. Before I didn't want to die, I wanted to stay by Autumn's side. But now I just want my life to end as soon as possible, so I can give her my corneas. Perhaps I have completely lost the will to live. My body visibly weakens day by day, until finally I can only lie in bed listening to my own labored breathing. That day, for some unknown reason, I suddenly felt much more energetic. The pain seemed to have lessened, and I even regained my appetite. I told the nurse I'd like some vegetable porridge today. The pity in his eyes when he looked at me was unmistakable. He went to the cafeteria and bought me vegetable porridge, even bringing a bowl of steamed egg custard, watching as I slowly finished every bit of the food. He asked if I wanted anything else to eat. I shook my head and told him I was a little sleepy and wanted to rest for a while. He lowered the bed for me, drew the curtains, and said, "Then sleep for a bit. I'll be right here. Call me if you need anything when you wake up." More injuries were concealed beneath her oversized hospital gown. Moments later, I fell into a deep sleep. In my dreams, my body felt incredibly light. Perhaps the vegetable porridge and egg custard had given me strength. But this one Autumn is still waiting to regain her sight. The physical pain is fading bit by bit, and my mind seems to be growing clearer. I see 20-year-old Ethan Shun and 17-year-old Autumn. Snowflakes swirl through the sky, silently drifting down to settle upon them both. The girl's face was flushed red from the cold as she grabbed Ethan Shun, who was walking briskly ahead, and stood in front of him. Ethan Shun, say it quickly. What did you just say? I didn't say anything. You must be hearing things. No, I heard you. What? Ethan Shunham. I love you too. The boy froze, the items in his hand falling to the ground. A cold wind blew past, stirring the girl's hair slightly. As she shivered, the boy pulled her close and wrapped her in his embrace. How wonderful. Let it end here. Let the scene conclude right here. A sharp mechanical alarm sound rang in my ears, abruptly cutting off my dream. The surrounding voices were noisy, really too loud. But it's okay. It was only for a moment. Gradually, all the sounds around me faded away. The images in my mind also slowly disappeared. Only endless emptiness remained. The end.